It's one thing when people complain publicly or in the media. It's a different story when people start voting against the president, especially when the bill was passed in a hyper-partisan way in the first place. Let's talk about the latest problems with this great Obamacare next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Yeah! Okay!
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
You cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln from Carbondale to Elgin that we can collectively continue to tolerate the insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East Texas.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizens.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for
Happy
the
Friday. Well, of course, maybe it's not that happy of a Friday if you're a Democrat in Washington as a member of Congress and you have made a choice, and there's over 30 of them or so, and you've made a choice to basically say that you were dead wrong to go along, to get along in 2010 if you were there in Congress in 2010. Oh, what am I talking about? Well, let's talk about that today here on Get Right with Lenny McAllister. It's you and me. You know the drill. You know where to find me. Very simple on Twitter. It's LennyMcAllister on Facebook. Very simple. tinyurl.com/LennyPage. It's tinyurl.com/Lenny Page. What am I talking about? You know, this cannot get any worse for the president. Now you have Democrats lining up to basically admit that they were wrong to approach Obamacare the way they did in 2010. And for everybody, and again, I want your feedback. You know the drill. You know where to find me if agree, disagree. Here's the thing, though. You cannot sit there and use the rationale that it passed this law in 2010. The Supreme Court upheld it in 2012. The law is the law. The Democrats are right. The Republicans are mad and blah, 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 and we are the world and rainbows and unicorns and Lucky Charms and all that other stuff that you want to argue when it comes to this law. You can't do that and then watch Democrats back away from this. President Clinton earlier this week, back away from this. People throw out, I don't know, the first bipartisan legislation, and I mentioned this on PCNC earlier this week. Throw out bipartisan legislation for the first time, and lo and behold, it's about delaying the individual mandate. Then you see Democrats in Congress vote against this. Here is the main thing with this. One, they're admitting that this was wrong. And I've said this previously. The best thing the Democrats could have done to pass the type of healthcare reform that America actually needs was to make sure that it was in some way, shape, or form a bipartisan bill. Go get 20 Republicans in the House. I mean, for example, Joseph Cowell was in the House out of Louisiana. He was a Republican in a minority-majority district that needed to vote for stuff like this in order to stay in office. That's just the bottom line. He needed to get a win that made sense for his constituents. Maybe you do something in a bipartisan fashion where you get him on board and you have him be a champion and you help him stay in office, or you at least help him have a better shot at staying in office. I mean, we know how the gerrymandered districts work across the country. None of that stuff happened. It was as if the Democrats figured Christmas came early. We were able to manufacture the supermajority in the Senate, until Scott Brown ruined that in January 2010. We have this huge majority in the House of Representatives, so we're going to do it the way we want to do it. Then blue dogs didn't go along with the yellow dogs, so they had to negotiate and create some green dogs, which eventually has become the law that has made everybody sick. And definitely not green with envy. So rather than getting Republicans on board, this is the track that they took, the political track, and now you have some Democrats that have to basically, on record, vote and say, we were wrong. Mary Landrieu out of Louisiana is going to have to, even though she, as of yet, hasn't voted on this, but with her proposals and throwing stuff out there, she is admitting, I was wrong. Even with the Louisiana Purchase, I was still wrong for getting behind this movement. I won't even call it legislation. I mean, yes, it's legislation. It's on the books. It's changing as we speak. It's law, but not law. Because President Obama changes it the way he wants, whenever he wants. So it's law, but it's not law. So calling it legislation is basically a technical term at this point in time. Because we don't know what it is. We don't know what sticks, what doesn't stick. It's very subjective. Law is supposed to be objective. That's supposed to be the beauty of the American dream from a freedom, a liberty, a legislative standpoint. Everybody knows what the law is, and we're all treated equally under the law. That's not been the case with Obamacare because it's subjective. It's President Obama wakes up. We saw this Thursday. He wakes up, I said those plans had to go. They started getting canceled. You know what? I'm feeling pretty good this morning. The polls are really slamming me this morning and over the last several weeks, several months, unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my mind on this law and basically do what I feel is best, what my administration and I, in the kindness of our hearts, have decided to do, despite the fact that we have put this stuff in place since 2010. We've been working on this really since 2009, and this just really, really, really is going in a bad direction. And my presidential legacy is doing its own death spiral, just the same way the economics behind ACA, Obamacare, is doing its own death spiral. You cannot, if you're a Democrat, feel good about where this is going because now you have Democrats on Capitol Hill admitting that they were wrong. Stuff that they admitted in back rooms, 2 o'clock in the morning, over a drink on a Friday night, in the confines of their own homes. They are now admitting on the record. Now, why is this significant? It's significant because there are rumblings that Obamacare is going to be repealed before the 2014 midterm elections. I don't think it's going to be wholeheartedly repealed, even though I think that more now than I used to. I thought it was absolutely positively not going to happen. Now I can look and say, well, I don't think it's going to happen. I am more inclined to believe that before the 2014 midterms, that there will be an overall delay of everything, or as Cat Williams likes to say, everything, before November 2014. And then from there, maybe we see a repeal. Maybe we see a repeal and replace. I said it eloquently in 2010. Instead of killing the bill, maybe they maim the bill. Maybe they severely maim the bill. I don't know. I mean, at this point in time, President Obama is taking a hatchet to his own self, so it doesn't really matter. I don't think it's going to be repealed, but I do think the more that you see this, and the more that Democrats admit that this has been a failure, and the more that Democrats admit, whether you want to hear them say these words or not, the more that they vote and complain and go out in front of this and try to show their constituents, well, we don't want this to be as is, to be the law that you got to deal with because of all the cancellations and all the inconsistencies and the inability to go through the process effectively, and your premiums are going up. As you see this, and as they vote against it, like they are today, as they, give on the media, which you may see this weekend, people going and talking about this law, I'd have to imagine the Sunday news shows are going to be filled with Democrats trying to ride the line between supporting the law but backing away from the law. As you see all this stuff, these are admissions of guilt. And if anybody thinks that, well, maybe we don't have to deal with gerrymandering because we can just vote people out. If anybody sits there and thinks, well, we don't need to deal with term limits in Congress because we could just vote them out. I say, and this is more than just a Democratic thing. This is a both sides bipartisan problem. Here is an example with what's going on with Obamacare as to why you cannot have career politicians basically be in Washington forever or go from their state legislatures to Washington. And between those two entities, they spend 40 years in government because they could admit this type of mistake in such a high stakes situation and still get reelected, still walk away with an approval rating as a collective under 10%. And still, just by walking away just a little bit and throwing a lame duck president, who, by the way, is term limited himself, underneath the bus, and by having a political living legend, another former president who's not going to be running for re-election, have him lead the charge, you too can still get reelected. Primarily if you sit in a gerrymandered district and you're serving in the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill. That is a problem. You could admit this flaw and pay no consequence whatsoever. Which is why you're seeing Democrats do this now. When people admit that their hyper-partisan ways, whether it's Republican or Democrat, when you admit that your hyper-partisan ways cause this type of confusion, chaos, angst, pain for the American people, there needs to be a consequence. It's kind of like what you're seeing up in Canada. Not quite the same thing, but with this Rob Ford guy. I'm sure we'll talk about this more over the days ahead. From what I'm hearing and doing my research with Sun News Network and some of the wonderful people that I've worked with north of the border, they can't get this guy out of office. They can possibly strip him of power, they can strip him of spending authority, etc. But apparently, allegedly, unless the dude is literally sitting in jail and serving a jail sentence, not holding for 72 hours, literally serving a sentence, that's the only way you can impeach the mayor, which, by the way, I think Toronto's 4th or 5th largest city in North America. And that's how that gets handled? It's the same thing with this Obamacare stuff. The Democrats are basically admitting that they screwed up, that they allowed their partisan loyalties. And that's where this is a problem. This wasn't good politics in 2010. This was partisan loyalties. It wasn't good leadership in 2010. It was partisan loyalties that led to the Obamacare Frankenstein legislation that we got after all the Tea Party rallies of 2009, after all the town hall forums that went amok in the summer of 2009, after the huge Tea Party protest. Did he spit on him? Did he not spit on him? Did he call him the N-word? Did he not call him the N-word? That we got in the spring of 2010. They're now admitting that Frankenstein that came out of that with all the backroom deals, and I promise you we won't do this, I promise you we won't do that. Let's stick together as Democrats because the Republicans don't know what they're doing. They're admitting 3 years later, A, we were wrong. B, this is what happens when you drive stuff home through partisan loyalties only. And C, we believe that if we do this soon enough away from November of 2014, that the American people will still vote us into office, even though we still have high unemployment, even though this landmark legislation technically, and again, not landmark being technically, but legislation being technically, because it's not really law. These are a whole bunch of, I think this is what we want to do, that are on the books. And anybody that says, Lenny, I disagree with you, you know where to find me, Twitter, Facebook, and my response, my rebuttal to you will be, if it's not a bunch of, this is what I think I want to do, on the books, then why in the world does President Obama get to wake up and change his mind on so many things so often? Because it's not working? Is that your response? Because if that's your response, none of it is working. None of it. So why not, I don't know, push back the individual mandate? Why not push back the whole law for a year? Why not keep the two things that people actually agree upon? can stay on your parents' insurance through 25. No pre-existing conditions. Why not keep that for 6 months to a year? That seems to be okay. Everything else, push back. We don't know where the subsidy money is going to come from. We don't, when these premiums are going up 100, 200, 300% in different areas, and you're telling folks, well, you can get a subsidy. You can only get a subsidy after a year of paying the premium. So then from there, the question then boils down to, do I pay the penalty or do I take this hit? 24 years old. I don't smoke. I'm a vegan. I work out 4 times a week. I work from home and I do nothing risky. I'm a virgin that's engaged to a virgin. I don't even need birth control. I mean, we could sit here and do this for a second and say, does that individual sit there and say, I pay the penalty or I pay 300% more than what I would have paid? Or than I already am paying. Do I just drop my insurance and hope for the best over the next year? Hope that my employer picks me up? See, if you're going to admit that you're making a mistake and you're going to treat legislation as if they're edicts, and this is the thing. This is why people call President Obama the names that they do in regards to being an emperor, blah, 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 which I don't do. But I can see how and why they do it. Edicts get to be changed whenever you want because there's only one person instituting it. That is an emperor. That is a king. That is a ruler from on high. That's a dictator. Now, again, you can never sit here and say that you've heard me call him those terms because I don't do that. Whatever. He's the president. If he tries to stick around past January 2017, then we have a problem. Show me the indication of that. We had one goofy congressman from New York say that we should get rid of the presidential term limits. And you saw how fast that went away. It got floated real quick, and it died. The end. So I'm not doing the name calling. But when it comes to these edicts, and I've used this term before with this president, you can't put out legislation and then change it when you want. That's the problem with all this. The employers are pissed off. They're angry. We'll delay the employer mandate. Pelosi and Reed's constituents are upset. Let's give them a whole bunch of exemptions. The unions are upset. Whoa. Back it down a little bit. We'll take care of you too. Individual mandate. Even though you voted for me, you can't contribute to my war chest. And by the way, I'm a lame duck president. I don't need your money anymore. You will be doing this. I don't care if the system's broken. I don't care if I kind of knew but didn't know because they kept me out of the loop even though I really was in a loop. Which, by the way, every time this president acts like he doesn't know that he's in a loop, and I've mentioned this before on the show. Every time this president acts like he doesn't know what's going on, doesn't that make you feel a little bit worse? He's supposed to be so smart, so well-spoken, he's going places. I'm not going down that stereotypical path either. But you get my point. He was supposed to be able to have a handle on this. No drama, Obama. That's what we heard in 2007 and 2008. This has been nothing but drama. Now his party is basically admitting that they were wrong to go down this path. Now, whether you want to blame Pelosi and Reed, you want to blame Pelosi, Reed, and Obama, you want to blame President Obama exclusively, whatever the case may be. What you are seeing today with votes, what you are seeing today with legislative balloons being floated out there are admissions of guilt. And to me, it's not just the Democratic Party that's guilty of this. Although, in this instance, it's pretty much exclusively the Democratic Party. I will say that this is an indication that the system is broken. But anybody that sits there and wants to talk to me about Republicans gerrymandering districts in 2010 after these elections, actually they were gerrymandered in 2011 then, after the midterm elections and after Obamacare was passed in April 2010, don't come to me with that argument because it's wrong. In this instance, with this flaw and with this set of politicians taking advantage of a broken political system, when you look at the label as to who is guilty of it, you can't go any further than the Democrats. You can't go any further than the leadership on Capitol Hill at the time, which was Majority Leader in the Senate, Harry Reid, who is still the Majority Leader, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives at the time, who was Nancy Pelosi. Listen, as I go, I'm just going to say this very, very clearly. You need to be paying attention to this admission of guilt, because the more that they talk, the more it's going to unravel. And the more that it unravels, the more that it should wake up every single American to the realities of the broken political system that we need to fix immediately. Because if you're going to break this type of reform with the numbers that they had and the political capital that they had after 2008, how are we going to get past the employment problem? How are we going to get past the national debt problem? How are we going to deal with things on a geopolitical scale if a major domestic and much needed, by the way, piece of reform could not get done? How are you going to deal with immigration in a way that doesn't look just like this? Hyper-partisan, very broken, very polarizing, and ineffective. That's my take on this. It's unfortunate that we're seeing it. I don't even feel like gloating because, truth be told, if Republicans win and Democrats don't, or if Democrats win and Republicans don't, generally speaking, that usually means Americans lose either way. What's your take? You know where to find me on Twitter, LennyMcAllister. On Facebook, you know the drill, tinyurl.com/LennyPage. I always enjoy you spending your week with me. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Go Steelers. We need a big win. And I will talk to you on Monday. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great, great weekend. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.